I'm the head of services for SpreadFast, and we're happy to have you all here in our headquarters office down in Austin, Texas, where the world comes to us for 1 week a year. So my day job is working with customers long-term at SpreadFast, and my night job is the chairman of the board of directors for the Word of Mouth Marketing Association, which is all about spreading credible, authentic word of mouth as the most powerful way for us to exchange ideas and information. So it is such an honor to have all of you that our great partners of LinkedIn have invited in to come join us tonight. And I think we have a great fireside chat coming forth. So I want to introduce Francesca Levy, who will then introduce our panelists.
I don't think we need to do a big grand entrance one by one. Probably I'll just sit and get comfortable. So thank you everybody so much for coming. I know that you probably all have plenty of obligations this week, and we're hoping this can be a little bit of a relaxed sort of break from all that. Before I sort of get started with the conversation, I just want to give a little bit of background on kind of why you're all here and how LinkedIn and all of us sort of ended up here today. LinkedIn is been around since 2006, and for the first 6 or so years of our existence, we were focused mostly on helping people expand their professional networks. But since, and we think we've done a pretty good job of that. LinkedIn is more than 200 million members. But we think LinkedIn really makes sense as the sort of the single destination where professionals can go for all of their professional insights, everything they need to make themselves better at what they do or what they want to do. And to that end, we launched LinkedIn Today. We saw that people were sharing fantastic, professionally oriented content all over LinkedIn. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could package that in such a way that the people for whom that content was most relevant saw, exactly what they wanted to see. So that if you're in the shipbuilding industry, you're seeing the best shipbuilding stories. If you're in tech, you're seeing the best tech stories. And so we built a product that did that. And then, moving on from that, we thought, well, wouldn't it be great if people could, we have so many fantastic minds and thought leaders who are experts in their industries, household names, using LinkedIn already, and people are reading this content and really loving it. What if people could come to LinkedIn and find really great professional insights right there on the site? And so we launched the influencer program. And the purpose for this event is really just to bring you guys all here, both influencers and our partner publishers who've been working with us since we launched LinkedIn Today, to help us display the best content and create the best original content. We are blown away by the quality of the original content that's created on LinkedIn, and also the third-party content that all of our partner publishers graciously allow us to package and show LinkedIn members on our site. And we wanted to give you all a chance to get to know each other. We know many of you are following each other on LinkedIn. We figured it would be a great chance for you to put a voice to the LinkedIn profile picture. And I'll just kind of take a little bit of a break from the hectic South by scene. And so this little, fireside chat, I don't want, I know you guys have probably seen a few panels already in the past couple of days, so I want to keep this sort of informal, and because we're such an intimate group, I think in lieu of a Q&A after this, we can sort of mingle, and you can certainly come up and ask our panelists anything you like. So we thought, as a way of just kind of getting the conversation started and getting everybody talking, we'd bring in two of our fantastic influencers who make content already an integral part of their business strategies. So we have Clara Shih, who is right? Shy, I'm sorry. Who is the founder and CEO of Hearsay Social and the author of The Facebook Era. And Brian Solis, who is social media guru at Altimeter Group, and the author of The End of Business as Usual. So we're going to talk for just a few minutes, and I want to start with Brian about just ask you a quick question about your new book and how content for you, your sort of content strategy has changed, and how that's reflected in some of the changes that you've made to the way that you distribute your book to the public.
Well, this is a really good question. Jim from SpreadFast, are you here by any chance, or are you still getting the book?
Jim is, yes.
Jim, do you have the book handy by any chance? I love that. See, I got to go to
Slow
Spreadfast. The Spreadfast is not only a great technology platform, but they're good book marketers too.
It's beautiful.
So I wanted to show you this as a book, especially, you know, Don, Martha, you could appreciate this. Content is, as you all know, as influencers, is an important part of any strategy, right? I mean, content is sort of what inspires people to think something or do something or feel something. And I actually think that we don't, not we, but just society in general doesn't place enough emphasis on great content that isn't just consumable, but that is shareable because it's meaningful. And I think that because when you think about content in that regard, it changes sort of how you approach the writing, right? It used to be like, I have a great idea, I need to say something, I need to get something off my chest. But now I think we have to take a little bit more of an empathetic approach to say, look, this is a social web, it's a connected web, it's incredibly distracted in terms of what's flying at you and what you're focusing on. And I realized, like, yeah, I've got to write another business book. You know, there's a sense of me sort of competing for relevance, or at least the need to want to compete for relevance. And if you think about the mobile apps that we have on our phone, the tablets that we carry with us, the social networks that we use, why would I write another book that looks like every other book on a bookshelf in every store out there? Why would I write another ebook that people are just going to thumb through on Kindle, highlight some key quotes, and never really revisit? So if the book is about the future of business, and I say that in the future of business, your brand is at the mercy of shared experiences, then the book needed to be an experience. And so I have one, and this one is actually for Carol, because Carol of LinkedIn is the one who brought me into the LinkedIn Influencer Program. And then I have one for you too.
Oh, thanks.
But not in my hand. It's designed to be a mobile app. It has a nav bar. You go through like this analog experience of just sort of digesting content in a very simple way that is rich with big visualizations of quotes, 4 colors, has original artwork to visualize ideas. So you could actually get the concept of the book just by turning the pages and looking at the imagery, or you could read the content as well. So long answer, but the reason why I wanted to show you this is because I had to reimagine what a book could be in order to find relevance for content to mirror what I'm trying to do as not a social media guru per se, but as somebody who studies technology's impact on culture and society, and then reverse engineer it so what businesses could do. So if you have to reimagine what a book is, then we're all going to have to reimagine what it is we do as businesses every day. And I think that's the important moral of the story.
Thanks. Clara, can you talk a little bit about how, you know, how content and the importance of content has sort of changed for your business strategy?
Yeah, I'll speak first in the general. It's interesting. If you think about the first wave of social media, it was blogs and wikis. And this really shook a lot of our world in the 90s and early 2000s. And it was interesting, but what became more interesting, thanks to the LinkedIns and Twitters and Facebooks of the world, was what happens when you layer identity and relationships on top of content. Because at that point, the World Wide Web, which is chaotic and kind of like the wild, wild west, not really sure what to trust, even if it's the first Google search result, all of a sudden, we bring order to the chaos. And we bring trust to the chaos because we trust our friends and our family and our colleagues. And we opt in, we choose who we subscribe to, who we follow, et cetera. And so I'd say that the last 2 or 3 years was really about the identity graph on top of content. Now the problem was that this, for too many publishers, meant going away from actual substantive content and moving only to the 140 characters. And unfortunately, except for in Chinese, which is much more expressive per character, in English, most of the time, you can't convey all that much in 140 characters. And so I think that's really the brilliance of the LinkedIn Influencers Program and other content platforms like it, because we're going back to giving the substantive, which is what everyone craves. We want not just a superficial layer, but we still have that identity graph and that relationship graph mapped on top of it. And you look at all the studies that show there's never been greater distrust of big corporations, of big media, of ads. People just don't believe it anymore. I mean, Wall Street, mainstream media, they've lost the trust of the American people and of the West, and large parts of the US and around the world. And so what we're seeing individuals do is they're running for the hills. They're running from big media and going to people that they trust. And that's why these individuals, influencers, they could be reporters, they could be personas like Frank Eliason, what he did at Comcast, they are winning back the hearts and minds of their constituencies. And they're using then, once they've got that substantive content, they're using the 140 characters to fuel the distribution of those thoughts. And that's why I think this is the future of where content is going, and that going forward, advertising is not going to feel like advertising. And the blurring of the lines between paid, owned, and earned, of which Brian is such an expert and writes about very eloquently in his book, that is the future.
Can you talk a little bit more about this sort of the trust aspect of it? Because it's increasingly being proven that, as you say, people want to read content that's been shared by people they know, and that's part of the appeal, as you say, of the influencer program. You see somebody following Clara Shire just made a comment on something that you wrote, and it's somebody in their connection that they trust. If they read it, then it must be interesting, for you too. So, do you think that is changing the type of content that people are? And do you think there are any upsides or downsides, because there's not a sort of all-knowing authority that's the front page of the newspaper that's just kind of broadcasting to you what you need to know? Do you think people are getting more limited in the kind of information and news they're receiving, or is there some other outcome that we're not sort of seeing?
Yeah, I think there's as always with any new technology or new communication paradigm, there's a flip side. So the trend that we're seeing is that because of the level of hyper-personalization that's possible on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, not only can you target people based on profile, but you end up with clusters of people. So if you're a Republican, it makes your job really easier. A Democrat, you can just message your constituents with what you're saying. You can literally geo-target your post and hit those clusters. The danger of that is that you end up with even more polarization, because people who believe certain things, they end up only reading the certain things of people who are in their social networks, and then there's ramifications for society. But that's a different topic that we could spend an entire day on. The positive side for what we all do is that in the past, if we wanted to reach 10,000 people or 1 million people, you would rent a list, or you would try to measure your press release and see if your reach metric was 10,000 people or 1 million people. Well, that doesn't work today. Today, 1 billion people who have chosen to sign up for LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, they're saying that they don't want to read your press release. They're tuning you out. It doesn't matter. All they want is to see what their friends and trusted advisors and colleagues are reading. And so the new way to reach 10,000 people or 1 million people is to start with a smaller base of people who truly, with whom you have social capital, and then optimize the content for sharing, just like Brian said, so that you reached 1 million people not through blasting an email list to 1 million people, but through potentially multiple hops. And I'm really interested in the analytics of that going forward, of tracking how content moves through social networks and through different clusters.
Brian, can you talk a little bit about something that Clara touched on with the breakdown of the blurring of the lines between advertising content and other types of content? What are the implications of that, as far as you're concerned?
Well, all right, so I'm pausing because there's two answers I can give, and I'm trying to figure out which is the most politically correct.
Oh, don't worry about that.
We're all friends here.
We want the other one.
There's sold. All right.
He was fishing for that.
Yeah. The blurring that's happening right now is literally because people don't know what it is that they should see. So they're sort of experimenting. There isn't blur because they've actually found the recipe. The recipe for this blending of what is paid storytelling is one of things that I would say is based on engagement because it's relevant to you, and also that there's an ingredient of resonance that's baked into it so that it stays alive in the stream because it keeps being shared. So I just talked about engagement, which is something that everybody's talking about in social, but I just threw out resonance, which is something no one's talking about. People measure success of paid, earned, owned on engagement, likes, shares on LinkedIn, comments, tweets, all of these activities. But they don't necessarily see, did it stay alive past the proverbial hour, and did it also make people do something? Because people aren't thinking about content, as having the ability to move people to do something meaningful and having an outcome, right? And so I call that sort of like a C to A, like a click to action. So what if your content was designed to not get somebody to read it and not just get somebody to share it, but to get something to do something with it, right? And therefore your content becomes part of a bigger movement. The problem with why there isn't that blurring that we're looking for is because that movement hasn't been defined. People aren't necessarily stepping back to say, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to engage people with? We keep competing for the moment. We keep getting caught up in this whole real-time, oh my God, did you see what the Oreo cookie guys did with the Super Bowl? That's the future of marketing. And we're forgetting about the right time. Right? So I have this formula that has been coming out of this whole thing about like where I see native advertising going, where I see storytelling going. I think that there's this formula of ignorance plus arrogance equals irrelevance. And that is at the heart of a lot of content strategies I see out there. But what if we could think about it from a greater sense, a better vision, a better outcome, something more meaningful, where content becomes sort of a manifestation of the community of people you want to be engaged with. So hopefully that answers your question.
So we have a couple minutes left, and I want to sort of get both of your takes on this sort of question. And it's a little bit of a pushback on what you've been saying, but so the one of the values, I think, of the influencer program is, we have people with all different kinds of, agendas is too strong a word, with all different kinds of reasons why they want to, sort of broadcast their professional insights to large networks of people. And we've asked you all to be part of the influencer program because we know that your insights are valuable, so we're not worried that we're going to have people who are just sort of trying to reach people to sell them something and then do nothing else and give them no value added. What I think, you guys can duke it out later.
Not mine.
What I think works well about it though is the transparency, right? So if you want to plug your book in an influencer post, you link back to your book and you say you're writing in the first person, and you say here's some great professional insights I want to share, and also here's a cool thing I did that I want you to hear about. So, what do you think about that kind of approach versus a more, and what are the implications for the trust that we were talking about with that approach versus an approach where readers don't necessarily know whether they're seeing marketing or purely editorial content? Either of you can answer.
It's hard to separate the two. I mean, if we're all being our authentic selves, it's not like, at least for me, it's not this way. It's not like I'm a different person at work than I am at home. I mean, certainly I talk more about social media when I'm at work than when I'm at home.
Hope so.
My husband, with feedback from my husband. It's become that way. But I think it's important for people to understand that just like with any other medium, you shouldn't just talk about yourself, and you shouldn't just think about your call to action and what your outcome is. Mm-hmm. And it's the great thing about likes and comments and shares is that it's quite self-policing. And even if you're a strongly influential person and you've got a huge network of followers, if you post something that's overly self-promotional, it's going to self-police, and even your most ardent fans will either stop becoming your fans if you do that consistently, or they won't like that post and it won't have the resonance element that Brian talked about.
I'll just throw something on there. There's the being part of the LinkedIn influencer program has been sort of cathartic for me in a lot of great ways. You get so caught up in your own, and I call it the ecosystem lovingly, of course. You get so caught up in your own ecosystem that you sort of lose touch with why you started in the first place, and it was maybe because you had great ideas or because you just wanted to connect with other really awesome people on, that you didn't get a chance to meet in the real world yet. But the LinkedIn influencer program was a little bit intimidating, and everybody in this room has such amazing stuff, and then you're like, hey, what's your first post going to be on? And you sort of stop to rethink. You're part of something that's bigger than you. And so you then challenge yourself to make something much more compelling, much more engaging, something much more resonant. And then, of course, you guys put the views on each one of those articles.
No pressure.
A little bit of healthy competition.
No pressure whatsoever. So it was, I don't want to say it was paralyzing, but it really made me rethink what I wanted to write about. So now it's had a really amazing effect on me where I will publish my ideas first on LinkedIn before my own blog. And it's because of the value of the community and the value that I feel like I'm part of something not just for me, but part of like just amazing people.
And the other thing too is, again, going back to that point between personal and professional identity. In the past, a lot of us would blog. I used to work at Google and Salesforce. I blogged for both companies, and then when I left, my name was still on there, but basically it wasn't resonant. It was old news. This is part of my LinkedIn profile, and I started Hearsay Social 4 years ago, and I can't imagine myself ever not being there. But at some point, I'm not going to be there, and so. But my LinkedIn profile and my identity, my reputation, will be with me all my life, and that's really powerful. That's something that we've never had before this.
Thank you guys so much. Hopefully, if anybody else was intimidated or paralyzed about writing more influencer posts and being constantly prolific, author, then this casual, friendly environment will help break that down, and you guys will be publishing tons more posts all the time. And I'm sure that you guys will have many questions for Brian and Clara that you can certainly. I hope you're open to chatting and hanging around for a while. Thank you guys so much for sitting down and talking to us.